Hello, everyone. Welcome in. I'm going to give this just a few moments as our numbers rise. My name is Meghna Jarati. I am the event manager here at Booklarder. I'm here in the Fremont neighborhood. Paulina, our moderator today, is also in Seattle, and Erica, our author, is tuning in from Florida. If you are just signing in, feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of the screen to let me know where you're listening from tonight. And if you select the to everyone option, then everyone here will be able to see your message tonight. All right, let me give this just a few more moments. Again, my name is Meghna. Here at Booklarder, we are thrilled to be able to continue to offer virtual author talks. It's really been wonderful to continue to welcome authors from all over the country and all over the world, including Erica, who, like I mentioned, is tuning in from Florida tonight. Thanks for joining us. Tonight's author talk is going to be about 60 minutes long. We will have some time for Q&A at the end. If you have any questions for Erica or Paulina, you can drop them into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And you can use the chat button on the sidebar here to share any thoughts and messages. See, Nina's joining us from Ballard. Welcome. Just moved to the neighborhood. So happy to have you here. And we've got Janine from North Seattle. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Tonight's author talk is about this wonderful book, Cheese, Sex, Death. We're going to be hearing from author Erica Kubik, who is, again, just waiting here on the other side. We'll turn it over to both her and Polina Jesnikova, our culinary director, to talk a little bit more about the book tonight. You can purchase a copy at booklarder.com. We will have some signed copies if you are interested. I'll paste a link in the chat if anyone is interested in purchasing a copy, and you can support this author talk by purchasing your copy either from us or from your favorite independent bookstore. Like I mentioned, we'll have some time for questions at the end. We'll get to as many as possible, but please do drop those into the Q&A. I'd like to welcome Erica and Paulina. Erica is a Chicago native and cheesemonger turned preacher behind cheesesxdeath.com, a website devoted to educating, exciting, and empowering cheese sluts everywhere. Through sultry cheese porn and educational church services, Erica converts common cheese lovers into confident connoisseurs and worshipers of cheeses. Cheese, Sex, Death, a Bible for the Cheese Obsessed, is her debut book. Erica is joined in conversation tonight by Polina Jesnikova. She's a Seattle-based food writer, recipe developer, and cooking class instructor whose work has been featured in Culture, The Washington Post, Savor, The Kitchen, and Seattle Magazine. She is currently the culinary director here at Booklarder, and her first book, Hot Cheese, came out in September 2020. Her second book, Everyday Cake, is due to come out in April 2022. We are really excited to hear from both Erica and Paulina. They're going to be getting into a few questions. We're going to see them demonstrate how to build the ideal cheese plate in time for the holidays. So hopefully you all have some cheese to join along with us. And if not, you can rewatch this author talk after it is posted within 48 hours and hopefully use it to create your Thanksgiving or holiday celebration cheese plates. Welcome, Paulina and Erica. Thanks so much for being here tonight. Come on over.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for being here.
Erica, I know I said it when we just, spoke a few minutes ago, but it's been a while, and I am so over the moon for you with the release of Cheese, Sex, Death. So exciting. It was funny, a few days ago, I was looking through my photos and I had memories come up from I think it was the last time I saw you in person. We were both working at Culture. I was the editorial intern, you were the digital editor. I think this was like 2018, and it was around this time, around Thanksgiving. and we were working on the raclette issue.
Oh my God.
And I remember going to the store, picking up like chips and cornichons, and you had like a half wheel of raclette that you just like, we were trying to get a good video of you kind of like melting and scraping the raclette over the plate of chips, and kind of getting that beautiful cheese pull and melt. And I was rewatching them, and I was like, this is so, it was just kind of a coincidence that I came across them.
That's so funny. I definitely remember that. It was the joys of working in cheese social media.
Yeah. And I remember you talking about Cheese Sex Death, which is also the name of your blog and Instagram. And I remember you were excited that you were about to hit 10,000 followers. And now you have over 40,000, and you are a published author, which is amazing. So congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before we start talking more about the book and jump into the cheese plate, I always interested to hear from people in the cheese industry how they came to cheese. And so in your context of your book, I wanted to know, first of all, who is Cheesus, because you talk about Cheesus, and how did you find her?
I love that question.
How did you accept her in your life?
I love the way you're framing this question, because every time I answer it, I always call it my come to Cheesus moment.
Yeah.
So I'll start there. Like, how did I get into cheese? Basically, I studied film production and English literature at kind of a science-based school. So I had like no prospects after I graduated. I really did not know what I wanted to do. But I ended up like, I fell into this internship at a chef's industry magazine in Chicago. It's called Plate Magazine. It's a really wonderful magazine. And I was just like editing their like chef's interviews and like some like demos that they were doing, just like really basic video content. And they were working on their Spanish issue at the time. And at the beginning of the issue, they wanted to have this like little chart about different Spanish cheeses. And they just said like, you can fill out whatever cheeses you want to put in here. Like, that's totally cool. You just can't do Manchego because everyone knows about Manchego. We want to do like different cheeses. But I had no idea. I mean, I didn't even, to be honest, like I didn't even know what Manchego was at that point. Yeah. So I just like was very basic about it. I just Googled Spanish cheese and I found a website that was like SpanishCheese.org or something. And I just fell down the rabbit hole. I was so amazed by the onslaught of different varieties that were all over the country. There were so many villages that like, there's like a specific cheese that was so important to them, and they were all made in such different ways. And then I was like learning about sheep's milk cheese, and I was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. That just shows how basic my knowledge was back then. So I literally, after that, I Googled. I was like, that moment, I was like, this is the light shining down on me. This is the moment where like I meet cheeses for the first time. So I Googled, how do I devote my life to cheese? I found a blog called MadameFromage.com. It's by Tenaya Darlington. She's like one of my biggest idols. And it said to become a cheesemonger and to buy a bunch of cheese books. So I did that. I had to apply at my local cheese shop 3 times. They did not get back to me the first couple times. But I was like, no, there's literally, I have nothing else to do. So I'm going to apply again. And yeah, I got that job. And then eventually I just like wanted a bigger audience. So it snowballed into a blog. But for me, cheeses is, you know, I think old cheese have a time and place, like American craft singles, like absolutely on a burger. I love it. I've never like bat an eye at any of that. But for me, cheeses is artisan cheese. It's something that continues the ancient craft of cheese making, which really started at the dawn of agriculture, which I think is really fascinating. Like, people don't really understand how entwined cheese making is with the history of civilization. It's like that connection. Also, cheese is actually very important in ancient religious rituals. It was used as an offering to the gods, and it was stored in temples. So it just makes sense. But that's definitely what framed calling it a Bible for the cheese obsessed.
Right. Well, it's interesting, you know, because I mean, you call it a Bible, and not only because it's like, you know, kind of acts as a reference book, but it's actually formatted, you know, in the style of like the Christian Bible, where it's divided into the Old Testament and New Testament. And I feel like you do such a wonderful job of kind of going through the history and development of cheese and like laying that really strong foundation before you talk about, you know, how cheese is made and the different types, and then in the New Testament of cheeses, like how do you actually enjoy it? And I just feel like it makes the book really unique and clever and just very very different from other books on cheese that are out there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, one of my biggest goals in writing this book was definitely to make everything just super palatable.
Yeah.
Didn't really mean that pun until I started saying it, but I guess I do. Because I mean, there's so many cheese books out there that I cherish so deeply, and I could not have created this book without them. But I think a lot of them have been written for more of a cheesemonger or somebody who's a cheese professional. And it can be kind of difficult to access that information because it's so overwhelming. I mean, I've been studying cheese since 2013, like it's been almost 10 years. So, and it's still like, there's so much I wrote a book about it, and there's still so much I have to learn. It's a really overwhelming food to learn about. So I think that presenting that information in a way that's like really cheeky and fun and playful, and also like showcasing like how sexy the cheese is, and like that's the first thing you want to focus on, like that it's delicious, it's something that you get to enjoy, and then kind of fill in the rest of that knowledge that like helps you just appreciate it more.
Right. And I do feel like, you know, as someone who's been following your Instagram for a really long time, and then reading the book, like you have such a distinct voice in terms of writing and talking about cheese, and also a distinct style of photography and taking photos. As I was looking through the book today, you have a few chapters on like the different types of cheeses, and one of them being wash rind. And I was reading the description for Grayson, which is a wash rind cheese from Virginia. And just reading the description, I was like, this is, if I read this out of context, not knowing that I would be like, this is Erica's writing. And I just want to read an excerpt from the description for those who are tuning in. So it's Grayson from Virginia. You write, an American original, Grayson from Meadow Creek Dairy is a powerful, unapologetic dominatrix that'll obliterate your taste buds with the kind of bodily stink that'll make you fall to your knees in worship. And then later on you write, she smells like your dirtiest, sweatiest body parts, while her plump, golden interior tastes of bacon quiche, boiled peanuts, pork rillettes, and herbal bouquets. She's one of America's stankiest creations, a true wonder to behold.
So true. I mean, every word of that.
And I was reading and I was like, how did you, again, your voice is so distinct. Like, how did you develop that style, or like that way of thinking about cheese? And maybe that kind of goes, back to the question of like, what is the connection that you see between like cheese and sex,
Mm-hmm.
and then, death as well.
Yeah. I would say that I'm very heavily influenced by a couple other food writers. I mean, if we're going to go back go all the way back to MFK Fisher, the way that she wrote Consider the Oyster is just like so sensual that definitely was like a big influence for me. And cheese specifically, definitely Tenaya Darlington, as I mentioned, her book, House of Cheese, the ways that she describes cheese is so sensual and so beautiful and so descriptive. She's an English professor, a writing professor. So like she's just incredible at her craft. And then also Tia Keenan has been a really big influence on me. She has a book called Melt, Stretch, and Sizzle. It's a book about cooking cheese, a lot like hot cheese. Yeah. But it's like it's more on the goth side. Like it's very sexy. And she writes about, even just writing about like the science of melting cheese. She calls it like a menage a trois between protein, fat, and moisture, and how like the perfect ratio of elements has to come together to create a cheese that's really oozy and gooey. And it was just like a really approachable way of describing something super complex, like the science of melting cheese. That's her writing is spectacular as well. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that those three women have been hugely influential on me. And it's just like other, I don't know, like there's other writings that are not necessarily about cheese that have been really influential, but I think that for me, cheese is inextricable with sex because it is a product of sex, right? Like an animal has to get pregnant in order to give milk. So there's that. And it's also, you know, it's like literally milk comes from boobs. So like it's naturally really sexy, but then there's also the way that people react to it. Like way before I started writing, people talked about how cheese has like a sexual, almost like an aphrodisiac quality to it. There's like even there's back in ancient Greece, there's a relationship between halloumi and Aphrodite, which I think is really interesting, and or even go all the way back to Mesopotamia and the city of like, or the Sumerian culture, Inanna, which is like the goddess of sex, almost like the original Aphrodite. She actually required offerings of cheese to her temple, and the way that she was wooed by like her suitor was that he was a shepherd and he wooed her with dairy. So I mean, it's not like an original concept, but I have definitely capitalized on it.
Yeah. And how does death play into it?
You know, actually, there was a book that I read before I started my blog. It's called Cooked. It's by Michael Pollan. It's a Netflix series, it's a great series, but he interviews legendary cheesemaker, Mother Noella. She is a nun in Connecticut, in Bethlehem, Connecticut. And she has this quote in Cooked where she talks about how cheese is inextricable with death, how it reminds us of our own mortality, because there's like this sense of like rot and decay, and like just cheese is aged in crypts. There's just something about it that is dark. I mean, there's also like a darker side to any industry, but you know, there's a lot of sacrifice that goes into cheese, especially when it comes to like cheesemakers and how hard they work. And it's really a very thankless labor, and they don't really make that much money. It's such an expensive product, but they don't really make that much money from it. It's just, it costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. So the death is definitely a node to that, but it's also a node to fermentation. Fermentation is, you know, it's in the category of death. There's definitely like life and death and rebirth that occur during the process.
Right.
So it's like a really, describing my brand is a really long answer, because, you know, I think that when I first decided what I was going to call my brand and eventually this book, it was really just like, oh, that sounds cool, you know, but when I kept thinking about it and breaking it down, there's just so many more layers to it.
Yeah. And it really, like, you really see it through your photos too. I'm going to show a picture. I can't do it justice, but it's just like this beautiful sensual photo of, what was it?
It's Bon Bouche from Vermont Creamery.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken.
And even just like this one, there's no like cheese pull, but it's just like a beautiful, beautiful wedge of like, is it
it's the Florey's truffle for Milton
Florey's
Creamery.
truffle.
So it's like a more of a bandage wrapped cheddar style cheese.
Right.
Amazing.
But the book itself is just so beautiful, not just like the photography, but just like the fonts. And I loved, you know, the front end pages of the stained glass windows and the illustrations of the cheeses, and all the different, you know, drawings, especially in the beginning. They're just so fun. And I really, I have to say my favorite picture though of the book is this one.
Yeah.
And I feel like it like perfectly kind of encapsulates the dark kind of gothic side of cheese and sort of like the religious ecstatic, you know, moments that you experience with it. So did you, for the photos in the book, did you take them all yourself? Like how did that work out?
I took pretty much all of them myself.
Yeah.
Obviously not the pictures that I'm in,
Right.
Except for the except for my author picture. That's actually just a selfie. But the picture that you were referencing, that like my inspiration for that was Mary Magdalene. I
Mm,
literally just was like looking into her and was just like very interested in her story, but also the aesthetic of just like the dark goth, like almost like Renaissance era of art. I guess before Renaissance, but regardless, I digress. I actually am very lucky to have some good friends that are incredibly talented photographers and stylists. So I had 2 friends assist me in that, who took the picture for me, and just like, it was just a collaboration. They were amazing about it. So they killed it. I also have 2 other friends that run another production company that helped me with the pictures that are in the book of tasting.
mm-hmm.
So those are the ones that were super professional. Everything else was shot on my iPhone. There's a couple things that I used a DSLR for, but mostly it was just, I started, when I was taking a lot of pictures for this, I was like using my DSLR, but at the end of the day, I just really like the style that my iPhone creates. It's also much easier for me to edit it to like have that really dark background and to like get that really glowy effect.
Yeah.
But I have to say that I really credit a lot of this book to the designer, Jen Quinn, who actually worked at Culture too. She was on the design team of the Herrings.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so you probably have talked to her at one
Maybe.
point too. She
Okay.
started a literary agency with a couple other people, including Dinah's my agent. It's incredible. And when they started it, she reached out to me. It was just like, hey, like, are you writing a book? And I was like, I'm scared. I don't know how. And she was just like, look, let's do it together. And they held my hand through the entire process. And I mean, Jen already knew me. She already understood my brand. She was already like a really big follower of my brand. And she just completely understood my vision. And even beyond that, like I could never have envisioned this book being as beautiful as it is. She's to credit for that. I mean, she definitely, like, I shot this cover, but it was a really stressful process. It's like, as I was shooting it, I knew it was going to be the cover. So it was like, there's definitely a couple of these cheeses that like weren't in the original shot, but she just superimposed them in, or just like added some more detail, like to this Mimolette. And I mean, it's incredible what she did.
Well, I
I'm
love
really
too, the
thankful.
cover is like sort of shiny, so it kind of mimics that stained glass effect. I mean,
Exactly.
everything is just like, yeah, the design is just so thoughtful and it really, really comes through. And then the other, you're just talking about kind of having that blacked out background and letting kind of the cheese be in the spotlight. And I feel like it really comes through on the chapter with all the different cheese plates. And I opened it up to this one, which is a fall harvest one, because you are going to talk us through putting together a version of it.
Yeah, I definitely made it a little bit more like Thanksgiving heavy, because that one was a little bit more like Halloween, early autumn.
Yeah.
But those cheeses on it are really great for this. Which are great for this time of year because they're a little bit more on the indulgent side. There's a little bit of like the sweeter flavors. There's some chocolate on the plate. So it's a really great all around holiday cheese plate. So
should
yeah,
we get into it?
I'm ready. All right, give me a second to just move my
and I'm going to turn on my
overhead.
cheese cam too.
All right, sounds good. All right.
So what cheeses did you end up going with? Because you gave us a few different options.
Yes. Okay. So I tried to go mostly West Coast in honor of you guys. So I have this Mount Tam, which is from Cowgirl Creamery, and the Bay Area. It's just a triple cream brie style cheese. This one's pretty ripe. You can tell because it has like that gooey cream line. That's like this layer, which is really fun. The cool thing about that is that it's actually these molds on the outside are actually digesting the inner paste, which is why this is like chalkier and firmer, because it hasn't been digested. So that's how you know a cheese is getting ripe. It's when it's got that gooey cream line. I also have, instead of Mimolette, I have Pave de Nord, which is very similar. It's a French cheese, so not West Coast, but really delicious. And it has that really cool like autumnal pop. And then I also have Point Reyes Original Blue, which is this
Mhm.
beautiful cheese. I really love it. It's kind of like a very like slinky, lemony, silky flavor. And then for the accompaniments, we kept it pretty close. So I have, these are mocha pecans that I just found. I couldn't help it. I just really wanted to try them, but like any candy that would be great. I have some fig jam. I put it in a tiny jar that says Mike's Hot Honey, but it is a fig jam. I always reuse these little jars. I can't recommend it enough because it's just so much to put a
They're
really
so
big,
useful for cheese plates.
it's incredible. Then I have a little bit of dark chocolate. It's just from Trader Joe's, but really good one. And then I have an apple. I'm just using half of an apple. It's a Honey Crisp. And then just Firehawk crackers. You could do baguette or any crackers. I really like these ones because they're fun to plate with. They're really good for filling in the gaps between cheeses. So to start, I always start by prepping the cheese for a cheese plate. This is just half of a wheel of the Mount Tam, but one of my favorite ways to prep this is by actually cutting it hamburger style
Hmm.
so that you have like one half that kind of looks like this beautiful moon. And then I just kind of, do like a little pie slice. I call it the pie slice because you want to have a little bit of the rind in every bite. The rind is on any cheese is edible as long as there's no like plastic or cloth on it or anything. But this rind is actually really good. So I do recommend leaving it on and eating it and even featuring it. So I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to only cut this side of it so you can kind of have like that pretty like half moon look. But it's already prepared. And
I have a question.
yeah, go for
I
it.
always, when I put together a cheese plate, I never know whether it's best to kind of just like leave the cheese like in its shape, like as a wedge, or like cut it into pieces. Like how do you decide whether you're going to cut, a wedge of cheese into
Totally. That's a
pieces?
great question. I mean, it depends on the cheese. Like if this cheese was really, really gooey and it was like in a wedge shape, I would just leave it as is and serve it with.
So like the one that I have, I got a Delice de, how do you pronounce it? I never know.
Elise de Begonia. Yeah, totally. So that is because it's a wedge, I would literally just leave that whole and have it with like a butter knife like this.
Okay.
I'll add the knives to the plate later, but you don't really have to mess with that one just because it just gets really messy. It doesn't benefit the cheese to like break it up.
Right.
I'm also going to do the same thing with the blue cheese. I'm not going to cut it up before I put it on the board because I'm just going to like crack off or crumble off a couple pieces. But yeah, if it's a really crumbly cheese, that's what I recommend doing. I'll demonstrate that when I get it on the board. But if it can be cut cleanly, like this pave, it's like really good for cutting cleanly. Like it's very firm, obviously, a Gruyere, a cheddar.
Right.
As long as it's not too crumbly. For cheese like this, I'm just gonna cut off the bottom rind because I mean it is edible, like I said, but it's a little dry and kind of chewy. So I don't love eating it, but I like to keep the handle on.
I remember seeing too in your book, you had, maybe it was the mimolette where you kind of had like a little cheese curve where you left the rind but broke the interior up into little pieces and crumbles and left it that way.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of, for that presentation, if this was like much drier and much crunchier, I would do that. Basically, you just kind of like cut off the rind, but keep it in a shape. And then you just like crumble the inside. So it has like a little, I call it the shell because it's like the shell of the rind and then everything on the inside is already cut up. It just like looks really pretty. All right, so I'm just going to cut this guy into slices. I recommend keeping them as thin as possible. Sorry, my phone is definitely
it's fine,
bobbling around a little bit, but it's because I have a cheap tripod.
I got Lemieux's Gouda for my
Amazing. That's one of my favorite cheeses. That's one that I would also crumble. So for a cheese like that, I'll just do a demo.
Okay.
Because it's so crunchy.
I was following your lead, but I'm not going to do that anymore.
I'm sorry. It's hard when like they're different cheeses. So for that one, I would just like stick like the tip of a knife in there and just kind of like pull away chunks. I'll demonstrate that when I'm doing the blue on the plate, but that's kind of like what it would look like. So you just want to have like snackable like crumbles with that.
Right.
All right, that's probably enough of this one. All right, so I'm gonna put that aside and then prep my accompaniments. So the only thing I really have to prep is the apple, so I'm just gonna slice that.
I know, I feel like as I was looking through the second half of the book, again, I feel like you were so thorough in addressing kind of like every step of of enjoying cheese, from the
Mhm.
buying and the storing and plating and cutting. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, and I struggle with this a lot too, was like, what are like a handful of food ingredients or like pantry items that you always have on hand to put together a cheese plate? And
Yeah,
I was
that's a
looking,
great question.
looking through New Testament, and you had exactly a whole section on that. But I was wondering if you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. One of my main recommendations is really good honey. I'm gonna just start putting the cheeses on the board while I'm talking about that. But so definitely a really good honey. I like doing local honey, but you can do whatever you want. Just make sure it's something that's like really tasty that you want to eat it by itself, just as much as you want to eat it with cheese. So that, and then definitely any sort of fig situation, dried figs, if you can find fresh figs, that would be great. They're not that plentiful in Chicago, which is where I usually am. But dried figs, fig jam is really great. Either dried fig too, you can do like the Turkish, the like more like green figs, or like the black mission figs. Nuts, any toasted nut, dried like toasted pecans, like Marcona is really great, or like walnuts if you want, pistachios, whatever nut like you're feeling, definitely have those on hand, because any aged cheese loves dried nuts, and like a lot of other new cheeses too. I'm also, just describe what I'm doing. I'm making a little zigzag shape with this guy. I usually have to see what the cheese will like permit me to do when I'm plating it, because some of them will not make this zigzag shape, and then others, they're better to like make a fan, like something like this.
Yeah.
Do that as well. I really like doing the fan, but I'm gonna do the zigzag for now. So it's better for like I found it's better for like a rectangle shape, but triangles do really well with the fan. How are you doing over there? I can't see your.
I'm good. So
right, cool,
I started. So here's my Delise. I left it in a wedge. I got a wedge of the Cascadia Creamery.
Oh, so good.
Homage to West Coast as well. And I think similar to you, I might crumble it, although it is sort of on the softer side. And then I have Lamuse, which I started to kind of crumble.
Perfect. All right, well, I'm going to demonstrate how to crumble.
Okay.
Now that the blue is on the plate. So I just like to kind of poke it with the tip of the knife, and this one's super crumbly, so it makes it really easy. I kind of just like started touching it and it just sort of fell apart. But I just like leaving a big piece whole. I call it the presentation piece. So I'm going to like leave part of it whole, so you can kind of see like what the cheese originally looked like. Mm-hmm. These guys are kind of cross-contaminated. That's okay. And then you can just sort of like grab the little crumbles as you're eating it. But as you can see, it's like a nicer presentation than just crumbling the whole thing, because you can see like this piece, but you also don't have to worry about it starting to look messy. It just has more of like a rustic flair to it. At this point, I'm going to start adding the accompaniments. One of the things I like to do, blue cheese is so strong, you don't really want it to spread onto the other cheeses. So I call this the moat. So I'm making a little moat with dark chocolate. It's the best pairing with the dark chocolate is with the blue cheese. So that's why I'm putting them together, but it's also protecting everything else from getting funked up by the blue, because that'll definitely happen.
I forgot my dark chocolate. It's on the counter. I'm gonna go get it because
oh yeah, definitely.
On my plate.
While she's gone, I'm just gonna put my fig jam right there. Because that goes with everything.
And remember reading that dark chocolate and blue cheese is sort of like when in doubt, this pairing always works.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my all-time favorite pairings. The reason why it works is because the blue cheese is always extra salty. The salt helps the blue molds grow, so you can always just assume that it's going to be salty.
Right.
And dark chocolate is always sweet, of course. So they really balance each other out there because it's a contrast, but there's also like very complementary flavors going because the dark chocolate's very earthy and the blue cheese has that earthy funk as well. So they complement each other that way. But also there's like a texture situation, like the amount of cocoa butter that's in the chocolate. It has like that smooth, almost like fudgy mouthfeel, which kind of mimics like the melts in your mouth texture of the blue cheese. I just took my apple slices and fanned them out a little bit like that. It's really great for just like filling in big gaps in your cheese plate.
Okay.
I also added my fig jam to the plate while you were gone.
Great. I just added mine.
Perfect. Okay. Keep fanning out my apple slices. I'm probably just going to put apple slices in between each of the cheeses just because they go really well with everything. I like having something that's kind of juicy on the plate because it really is good for cleansing your palate. Cheese is so rich and like a lot of these accompaniments are also very rich. So having something that's like refreshing and sweet is really great. Because it just kind of like wipes your palate clean of everything. All right. So at this point, I'm gonna add some crackers just because like I have this like really big space right here and I want to fill that in. I just break these in half so they're easier to sit down. I really love
Do you kind of
these.
always go with like plain crackers, or do you like playing around with different flavored ones?
Playing around. I mean, I'll even put like a potato chip on here, like the flavoring on it, just because
Right.
I'm like, why not? But it definitely depends on the cheese. You know, if there's like a very special cheese on the plate, you know, like for example, Rogue River Blue just came out. That's one best cheese in the world a couple of years ago. It's made in Oregon, so definitely local to you guys. But if that was on this cheese plate, like I'm not going to put that with like a Zapp's Voodoo chip, you know, like that would totally defeat the purpose of buying like a $50 a pound cheese. So I would definitely do a plain cracker for that. But, you know, I like rosemary crackers a lot with like sheep's milk cheeses. That's really nice. So, yeah, I mean, you know, it's up to you, but I like to keep it pretty simple when the cheeses are really good. So you spend a lot of money on it, you know, and like the cheesemakers spend a lot of time making it. All right, so at this point, I'm just gonna add some of the pecans just in the spaces. Like there's like little gaps everywhere, and I just like to fill those in just because it looks really nice. So I'm just gonna throw that in. I'd say the best pairing with these pecans are probably gonna be the mimolette because aged cheeses just do so well with toasted nuts. Aged cheeses always have like that nutty flavor. So the nuts really bring that out. All right, so it's looking pretty full at this point. So I'm probably just gonna add one more pecan. So I definitely forgot to tell you guys to bring garnish, and it's totally unnecessary, but like for holiday plates, I really like just, you know, whatever's going on the turkey, whatever you have like leftover, just stick that in the corners.
I know that you love putting rosemary in cheese plates. So
Yeah.
I snip some rosemary sprigs.
Oh my God, awesome. Yeah, I love rosemary, but it's just so pretty. You know, sometimes it can be a little bit too strong for certain cheeses, like it'll kind of migrate onto it, but sometimes that flavor is really, that like extra smells really great. I just have a little bit of time. It's actually local to Florida, which is cool.
Oh, cool.
I know, right? Love supporting local. All right, so the only other thing to add, it's important to have a utensil for everything that needs it. So I'm adding it to the fig jam, adding a little knife to the Mount Tam, And to the blue cheese, you definitely don't need it for an aged cheese like the Mimolette or the Pate du Nord or Lamuse or anything. I just use my fingers. I mean, you can use like a little fork or a tong if you want, but
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's the plate, guys. Et voila.
Beautiful. I want to talk a little bit about you kind of go over the cheese knives and you make a point that like each cheese needs its own knife. And it looks like you're using butter knives, but I have a few here. I don't know.
Cool. Here, I'm gonna flip it around again.
All right, I'll turn off the screen. So I've got a few here, and these might be the same.
Yes, yeah. Okay,
This one.
cool.
I've got this one. Maybe
Oh, I can identify all these babies. All right, so the one that has like a bunch of the ones with the holes in the blade, they're technically the same. One of them just has holes that are supposed to imitate Swiss cheese, which is really cute. Not as useful as the one that has the bigger holes in it. The reason why the holes are in the blade is because it reduces drag. So when you're cutting like a semi-firm cheese, sometimes it like really sticks to the blade and it's kind of hard to get it off, and then it'll like break when you're peeling it off. It's like a whole thing. But with reducing the drag, it just creates a cleaner slice and it doesn't stick to the blade as easily. The one that hold up the one with this really skinny blade.
This one.
Yes, this is one of my favorite tools. So this is an offset blade. This is amazing for cutting soft cheeses because it has a really, really skinny blade. A really thick blade like this guy would just smash the cheese. And then instead of like having like that really pretty like thickness, it's just like smooshed. So you want to have that really thin blade. That's one of the only specialty knives that I recommend for most cheeses. The chef's knife is perfect.
Right.
But even like if you don't want to actually buy like the offset skin blade, you can also just use like a small knife like this. You just want to make sure it has like a pretty delicate blade on it so it doesn't smash the cheese. But a fun trick that I mentioned in the book is that you can actually use unflavored dental floss. You just like tie it with your fingers, you just like push it down. It acts like a cheese wire. Not as convenient as like an actual cheese wire using the offset blade, but it's definitely works in a pinch.
Yeah.
And unflavored, definitely unflavored.
Definitely unflavored. That is definitely not a cheese pairing that you'd want to.
No, I don't think mint. I mean, maybe a mojito, but like, I don't think mint works.
Yeah. Janae says mint cheese.
I know. There is actually a cheese that is covered in crushed peppermint from Sapporo cheese, and some people really like it. I ate it. I paired it with a hot chocolate once, which like wasn't, it's pink. It's covered in pink candy canes. It's pretty crazy. It's not for me, but honestly, I paired it with a hot chocolate once and it was pretty good.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you mentioned before we went live that you're going out to eat for Thanksgiving, but if you were going to cook at home and put together a cheese plate, what cheeses would you pick?
Yeah, so I would definitely go all the way. I would get Rush Creek Reserve, which is definitely in my top 3 favorite cheeses of all time. Only made in America, only made in Wisconsin. And my grandparents are from Wisconsin. So like there's lactose in my blood. But anyway, it's super, super soft and gooey. It comes in like a whole wheel. At least it should come in a whole wheel. Sometimes people cut. Yeah, there she is.
And so I got one too. I got a wheel too for Thanksgiving, and I'm just gonna recreate this.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Rush Creek Reserve with tater tots would go on my Thanksgiving table. I do it as much often as I can. Tater tots are usually my go-to because they used to be French fries.
Right.
Somebody when I was a cheesemonger told me about doing the French fries with the Rush Creek and the Harbison, and it's amazing. But the French, we all know those French fries don't have a great longevity. So if you're going to put like on the table, they get so soggy and then you can't, it's flaccid. You can't like get the goo.
Yeah.
So tater tots for sure. Or chips. Chips last forever.
I think I did dill chips with it last time, and that was really, really good.
That sounds amazing. I heard barbecue chips are also great. Also, like, could be sacrilege to some people, but
yeah.
So
Rush Creek. Anything else?
Oh,
I feel like Rush Creek is the cheese that every cheesemonger has for Thanksgiving. That's like a must.
Yeah. Other than that, I kind of want to do this anyway, but just like after Thanksgiving, but I want to put Rogue River Blue on the plate just because
Mm.
it's so special. And also like, I mean, Thanksgiving's kind of the last day before it's like all holiday, Christmas, Yuletide, whatever.
Mm.
And like gift giving season. I love that Rush Creek is wrapped in Syrah leaves and it also has like this little piece of like ribbon around it. And it just like looks like it's like raffia ribbon. It's, you know,
A little
it's an
gift.
ribbon.
Little
It looks like
gift
a little
for us.
gift. It's so
Yeah.
cute. And then the third cheese I would put on there is definitely Brabander Reserve. It's a goat's milk Gouda by Betty Kostner of Lemuse. She Fromagerie Lemuse in the Netherlands. She makes this beautiful goat Gouda called Brabander, but she'll also hand select a couple of wheels to age for an additional 6 months. And like Brabander itself is a delicious cheese, but when it gets extra aged, it gets those like crunchy crystals in it, which is like one of my favorite textures. But the flavors are so much more pronounced. It gets like pineapple-y and like brown buttery, and whereas the younger Brabander is more like strawberries and cream to me, like it's like more fruity, more like cotton candy, but then that just like takes on a whole new life as it ages. It's
Yeah.
spectacular.
Mm. And it goes without being said that most of these cheeses you could find at your local cheese shop.
Yeah, I mean, it's best to have like a really good relationship with your local monger. So if like they don't have something like that, like you can ask like, oh, maybe you can bring that in, which like I know I'd be prepared for them to say no because supply chain issues, especially this year are absolutely terrible. But yeah, I mean, most of those cheeses you can find at some Whole Foods. Rogue River can sell out really quickly, so it might be harder to find that one. I mean, it's true for all three of them. They're just like such a hot commodity because they only come out once a year. And that's why I want to put them on my cheese plate.
Right. I know one of my favorite parts of the second half of the book is you have a whole whole section on how to talk to your cheesemonger because it can be like so intimidating. It's like kind of walking into a wine shop and you know, it's just like I kind of want jammy wines, you know, like it's like hard to know all the terminology and it's easy to feel intimidated, and you like do such a wonderful job of, you know, going through the list of, you know, talking a person through that process. And then you have a whole like section on cheese terminology, like different words to describe cheese, which I think is really great too.
Yeah, you know, I teach a lot of, well, at least before the pandemic, I taught a lot of cheese classes and they're very active guided tasting. So I always have people like share what they're experiencing. I mean, even as a side note, it's actually really great to talk when you're tasting cheese because the aeration of your palate will help you taste more flavor. But people were always, even though like when I would do these classes, a lot of times they're like private parties. So people were just like with their friends, but they were still so scared to talk about what they're experiencing. So it's like everybody's traumatized from going to school. Like they think they're going to get the answer wrong, but there's no wrong answer. It's just really helpful for people to have a vocabulary to discuss what they're experiencing, because that way, if you can build that in your own time, the next time you go to a cheese shop and you say like, hey, I want something that's, you know, soft, but also like more crumbly and chalky and has like the fudgy texture, then they'll be able to point you in the direction instead of just being like, I want something soft. And then it's like, oh, there's a lot of different types of soft cheese. You know, there's like a gooey dippable cheese and there's like a softer, like crumbly, like more of a goat's milk style.
Right.
There's just, it really helps to have that resource.
Yeah. Well, your book is a really great resource. So
thank you. I'm really proud of it.
Yeah. Well, we have 10 minutes, so I kind of want to open it up for the audience to ask questions. And we have one question from Nina, and her question is, what is your favorite unexpected pairing with cheese?
Yeah, that's okay, this is a really weird one. I don't know if it's my exact, no, okay, I'm gonna go in two different directions. They're both chips. One of them is the one that like I go to the most often would be Prairie Breeze cheddar. It's a cheddar that's made in Iowa that's like very, very fruity and very crumbly, has like a little bit of the crunchy crystals happening. So good. I really like it with Flamin' Hot Cheetos. I know that's like, it sounds so sacrilege, but it's so good. And I love Flamin' Hot Cheetos. You know, I'm not afraid to admit that. So, you know, if you don't like them, then maybe try regular puffs, but yeah, I really love that one. And then I just like kind of went on a little tirade of trying. It was the beginning of the pandemic. I tried a lot of chips with different cheeses because I was emotional, as a lot of us were. A buttermilk blue with the Fritos honey barbecue twists. They're very like common Fritos, but like they're little twisty ones, and the honey barbecue. They're the best Frito, honestly. So freaking good. It has like a like chicken wing blue cheese situation
Yeah,
happening,
that's it.
and to die for. Yeah, that would be. I feel like the buttermilk with the honey barbecue twist was like the most unexpectedly good. Whereas like I kind of knew the Flamin' Hots would work.
I wonder if you could make a sauce, like a blue cheese sauce dip, and have
Oh,
that paired with the
yeah, that's a fantastic idea.
yeah. Mm.
Okay, cool. Mental note.
Okay, moving on. What's your method for choosing cheeses for a party with people of varying tastes / cheese sophistications?
Totally. You gotta go low and slow. I always go with a young cheddar or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a young cheddar, but something that's like not too sharp, because sometimes the acidity of cheddar for people who are like very, very beginner can be a little bit much. The unexpected cheddar at Trader Joe's is a really great option. Also Prairie Breeze, like I already mentioned, they're just like crowd favorites. You really want to go with like crowd favorites, trusted and true. I would do one soft, creamy brie style cheese. Mount Tam would be a really great choice. So would Fromage Dauphinois, which is definitely a lower budget option over a Mount Tam. And like if you're gonna have a lot of people there, then obviously everyone wants to save a little bit of money. It's really a great, delicious cheese. Everybody loves it, and it's a great beginner brie. And then I would do something that's just like a little bit more intense, or just like a little bit more advanced. And this doesn't sound like an advanced option, but Parmigiano Reggiano, like a good piece of Parmigiano Reggiano, one that's preferably aged over a year, is really, really great. Like a 2 month or 2 year would be really great. People don't give Parmigiano enough credit. It's just such a delicious cheese. And you can crumble it like with the Gouda, you could just like chip off little chunks of it. But people are really comfortable with like seeing it like Parmesan, like they know it, they've had it on pasta before. Everyone's had it on pasta before. But to eat it like by itself, you can get a fully new, especially with like some dried figs on the side or like caramelized walnuts. Really
I was
delicious.
gonna ask how you'd pair that.
Yeah, I mean that whole plate, I would definitely do figs, some toasted nuts, some crackers, and probably some honey, just like the very basic accoutrements that everyone should have in their fridge, but they're very safe, like the figs people may not have had like a dried fig by itself before, but it doesn't taste that different from what you'd expect it to taste like. It's just like, it's sweet, it's comforting, and it's like a little bit chewy. If you've had dried fruit before, like that texture.
Right. I know. I feel like the Parmesan's a good example because it is a cheese that everyone's familiar with, but having a really good example of it can be revelatory.
God, totally. It can change your life.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. The dry, chewy rind you removed from the Gouda, can you use that in broth making?
You can, you could, but you'd really have to strain it. It's different than a Parmigiano rind because those don't have anything on the outside. It's just like a brined cheese. So there isn't like any extra mold growth on the outside. It's just like smooth. Oh, it looks waxy. It's not wax. This definitely has some other development on it. So it's really dusty. Also, most Goudas actually have like a little bit of wax on the outside. So like that is, and also like some Manchegos also have like a plasticky outside too. So you want to be really careful. I really just stick to using Parmigiano in my broths. The flavors are just so much better with Parmigiano. Like it's still like a really good flavor there. This one can be a little bit musky, which is really delicious when you're eating close to the rind, like just nibbling on this. Like I would probably eat the cheese that's right off there, but that doesn't always translate well. It doesn't bring like that umami richness that Parmigiano does.
Yeah. And, we kind of covered putting together cheese plates and like pairing, but how would you, for those who are tuning in, how would you recommend storing all these cheeses? if
Storing the cheeses?
yeah, if there are cheeses left after,
Yeah,
after
yeah,
garden.
no, God forbid.
Yeah.
So one of my biggest, you can see that I didn't even cut all of this cheese. I left a little bit of it. So I would actually probably put this back in the fridge. I would store it in either cheese paper, like specialty cheese paper, or or like parchment paper. So like a wax paper, and then in a loosely sealed Ziploc bag.
Mhm.
Yeah, it basically mimics the experience of using cheese paper, but it's just like way cheaper. Like everyone has parchment paper in a Ziploc. But the biggest tip is that you don't want to put, if you're not expecting to finish all the cheese, you don't want to put it all on the cheese plate. You want to keep it in the fridge because cheese hates changing its temperature. The cheese was used to like being in a temperature controlled, humidity controlled cave, and that's where it's happiest. So if you're taking it out, bringing it to room temperature, and then putting it back, it starts to lose a little bit of its integrity.
Mhm.
So you want to only take out as much as you expect to eat. You can always take it out later and like refill the plate. There's no problem with that. But if you do let it sit out though, I do recommend, and there is leftovers, I recommend using it to cook with and not necessarily to actually put back on a plate, because it has lost a lot of like the texture, maybe some of the flavor nuance.
Right. So what are some examples of recipes that you would use cheese scraps in, or how would you use cheese scraps?
I would make mac and cheese would be my number one,
Mhm.
definitely.
You have a great mac and cheese recipe.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that one. I tested it a bunch, but I'm really happy with how it turned out. But the other thing I would recommend is, actually I can pull it up, is cheese toast. Honestly, it's the thing that I make
mac
the
and cheese
most.
right here.
Yeah, there's that guy. The bigger one is just like a cheese. It's like Harbison that I just poured hot noodle shells into. It's a Harbison. It's like Rush Creek Reserve, but it's called Harbison. It's a little bit smaller, so I don't feel as weird eating it as a personal serving, although there's no problem with that. But this is the 7 Blessed Toasts page. It's one of my favorites, is it just has a bunch of toasts on it. Yeah, which are really, it's my favorite. I don't know, it's just my favorite way of like eating cheese leftovers.
Yeah. And we had another question too, from Tina. Best beverage pairings for these cheeses.
Beverage
The
pairings.
cheeses on the plate.
I would recommend, my number one recommendation is always sparkling wine. The bubbles, just like how the apple slices can like break up the richness between bites, the bubbles are amazing for cleansing your palate. And it's just like I just like love sparkling wine. I'd go steer away from anything too sweet. You want to do like something a little bit more on the drier side. If you can do classic champagne, that's always the best. But Lambrusco is really fun, which is like a red wine version from Italy, obviously. But a good Prosecco, a good Cava. I would also say, if you want to do a non-alcoholic beverage pairing, I love to do like a seltzer. Especially one that has like a little bit, like a pomegranate spritzer is really great. I love pomegranate juice because it has a really deep flavor. It's like it's just so different from other juices. It's so rich. So it can really provide a great flavor. Also it's fruity, it's like the deep, almost like fig-like sweetness. So it actually complements cheeses really well. And then I'm gonna go back to alcohol. I really love whiskey this time of year. Whiskey is kind of like an unsung hero when it comes to cheese pairings. It goes really well. Manhattans are spectacular with cheese. I have an entire cheese plate that's around whiskey. It's called a whiskey plate.
See if I
the
can
first, yeah, it's the first cheese plate. Let's see, I'll try to pull it up too. Let's see, here she is, this guy.
one.
Yeah, here you are.
Beautiful.
I know, it's a little whiskey on the side. Yeah, so I would say I really love whiskey. Also, I think another beverage pairing that's really great is sake. Sorry, my parents are talking in the background. We're being a little bit loud. I'm like also listening in. I'm just like, love you guys, but I can't hear. Sake is really great. I think it's another one that people don't really think about a lot, but has like a sweet milky flavor because of the rice. It's like almost like rice milk, but distilled, and just has a lot of complexity to it. It's really great. And also now I'm just like giving you guys too many ideas, but my last one would be tea. There's so many different tea pairings. I have a section on tea pairing as well, which there's a lot to go off of.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the possibilities are endless for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think we hit 6 p.m. Does anyone have any last minute questions? Well, Erica, thank you so much for chatting with me.
Oh my God, I had
So
so much
excited
fun.
to
I'm really looking
dig
forward to
into
this.
this cheese plate and also to continue reading and having like plenty of inspiration, especially going into the holiday season.
Thanks,
I've had
dude.
to enjoy cheeses.
Oh, cheese is forever. I'm really looking forward to your next book too. I love hot cheese and I've really enjoyed cooking out of it. So thank you for all your work too.
Yeah. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Paulina. That was that looked delicious. I really wish I had a cheese plate in front of me now. For anyone that is listening that is interested in purchasing a copy of Cheese, Sex, Death, we have copies available at booklarder.com. And on behalf of the team here, thanks so much to everyone who joined us tonight. Such a pleasure having you here in our virtual audience. Erica and Paulina, I'll see you later. Thanks for being here tonight and taking the time to chat with everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Erica. It was good to see you and chat.
Yeah, thank you guys. Bye.
Bye.